I work with a local funeral company. It's a passion. I think that passion is because you're able to help people. But her famous words to me was, "You may be here, but we'll never accept you. The only time we'll accept you is when I come to your funeral." Basically refusing to serve us. We don't serve foreigners. You couldn't make it up, but I just said, I want to do this. We looked out the window and I went, let's just go.
How did you end up being a TV presenter?
It was never intended.
Welcome to Tell Beyond, a show where extraordinary people share their unfiltered, uplifting stories from life and business to lift you up and encourage you to rethink what's possible. Today I'm in conversation with Matt Southgate. Welcome.
Thank you.
You're not easily put into a pigeonhole, Matt. Growing up in London and Norfolk, you found a vocation as a funeral director from a young age. In your mid-30s, you left the funeral business and the UK to develop a second career as a TV presenter in Spain. After working in entertainment, however, the funeral business drew you back and you now live in Suffolk and work in funeral services. So we'll be asking you today what's driven you in all of your career choices, how it feels to support families in their time of need, and what you've learned from making big changes in your life. So you were born, I believe, in East London, Matt.
Yes, so actually born in Woodford in Essex. And then very shortly after that, then due to my dad's work, we moved to West Ham, which was quite an eye-opener.
What's the difference?
From what I can remember, where I was born was a lot more of a sort of leafier suburb. West Ham was more very full-on. At the time, it was quite a troubled area. A lot going on as well. My father was a housing officer, so he was basically looking after a whole estate of all sorts of characters and people. It then turned into basically accommodation for students for the London Polytechnic. And from there it kind of, we sort of had a very interesting life for a few years until it got to the stage where it was just, my family was struggling. I think probably because of the situation we as boys were being put in at school. We were being at school, and my father was, as a housing officer, was having to deal with families, not necessarily in a positive way, having to evict families even, and there we were at school with these families.
Oh wow, okay,
So,
everyone knew who your dad was.
They did, yeah, and bullying started, especially for my brother. I was a lot younger. I was only like 6 or 7 years of age. I can barely remember it really. And we used to have holidays up to Norfolk, and one day my dad just said to my mum, take the boys up to Norfolk and find somewhere to live.
Wow.
And we'll just rent somewhere and I'll commute down to London for the time being.
That's quite a big leap.
It was, yeah, and it was fascinating moving then to a tiny little village in Norfolk, in a little cottage that had no central heating, that was basically off-grid. A family that moved in that had funny accents.
That's you?
That was us.
That's not the people in Norfolk?
No, that was us. And having to then deal with the whole side of that. One of my first experiences I can remember is going down to the local shop and speaking to, she was the postmistress, a miss, and basically refusing to serve us and just saying, we don't serve foreigners.
We don't serve foreigners.
We don't serve foreigners. We don't like your type. So you're not welcome here. Get out. And I was like a 7-year-old boy. So I had to go back to my mum and dad and say, basically, they won't serve me at the shop because of who we are. That was interesting. I can remember my dad going down to the shop and having a few words with the lady. And we did slowly integrate, I think, with the village. But her famous words to me was, "You may be here, but we'll never accept you. The only time we'll accept you is when I come to your funeral."
Wow.
Yeah, which was quite a lot to take in as a little boy.
What did you make
7.
of it? What did you make of it?
I can't really remember at the time. I think I was more just shocked that, people were like that. Because I soon made friends within the village and the little school. It was a school of about 30 kids.
For the whole school?
For the whole village, yeah, 30 kids. And actually they were some happy times because suddenly it had gone from like quite a large, obviously, school in West Ham to this tiny little school. And yeah, they were good times, you know, cycling up little lanes on your bikes, going. So they're fond memories. It was just that initial, but soon afterwards, basically the whole village did accept us and we became part of village life.
So how important was the idea of looking after people or caring for people in your family, given the career decisions you made later? Was that something that was important in the family?
My dad always used to say that you only get one mum. And that was kind of drummed into us, that because of his, you know, his childhood and what he'd experienced. So I was very, very close to, and still am, close to my mum. And yeah, I think I appreciated, and they certainly did help me a lot in my early days, that closeness. So I was probably closer to my mum than my father, but in as much as I think she kind of got me, understood, if that makes sense.
It does.
Understood, yeah. Understood me and was there just to sort of say, yeah, it is okay. How you are, you're different, a little bit different, you know, just with how you cope with things or couldn't cope with things. So yeah.
Because when I know that you told me in the past that you felt from a young age that conducting funerals was a vocation, even as a kid.
Yeah, I mean, it all stemmed back from, again, I can remember clearly just playing with my mates in West Ham, and suddenly the busy road just went very, very quiet, and we just, oh, something's going on. And we sort of peered over the wall of the main road, and there was this funeral cortege, basically, of horses and carriages and Daimlers, and it was a complete, you know, production. And I just remember just staring, looking at this sort of open mouth as it went past with all the pomp and ceremony. And I just looked at my mate, and we didn't really know what was going on, but I just said, I want to do this.
Wow. From
that age, which was probably from about 6, 7. And from that time, it kind of then just, I was fascinated. And then moving, like I say, up to Norfolk, suddenly I was confronted with death, because I was having to deal with not humans but animals, which I'd never had to deal with, being in the, you know, almost like a city suburb that, you know, you might see the odd pigeon, but that was about it. Suddenly here we were having to deal with livestock that would pass away, and I would be finding myself saying, well, I'm going to carry out a little service. So I'd almost set up my own funeral services, but for animals and pets. And very soon it became almost like an obsession. I can remember quite clearly having a cemetery in our own garden underneath the orchard, where all the animals, when they, you know, their demise, would end up in our cemetery. Gravestones, the lots, making coffins out of boxes and all sorts of things.
Who was doing the digging of the garden?
It was all, yeah. So I think my parents realised that this was like a special place, that they didn't touch that. That was left. That was Matt's cemetery in the orchard, and it was it was quite strange. I think they used to think, what is going on? And I used to love going into churchyards or cemeteries and just reading the stones and trying a picture in my mind. I wonder what these people were like, or who were they, and oh, they're related to that person, or oh, that stone there's a connection. I would find that absolutely fascinating. And then to see, back then, you know, there were some beautiful funeral vehicles. Sadly, we don't see them so much now, but, you know, the old Daimlers, and to see them and the whole dignity of it and the ceremony and tradition, I just loved it. So, yeah, I think that's probably where it all started.
It sounds like your parents left you to it in a certain way.
They did. Yeah, I think they just thought, you know, it's harmless. And, you know, you speak to my mum or my dad, they always said I was a very sort of caring little boy. And, yeah, I used to get upset very easily, but I used to just find it brought some kind of comfort to me to be able to do this, even for an animal. You know, it might have been half a mouse that the cat's brought in. It was still going to have a little ceremony and end up in my orchard.
Given what your reception as a kid in Norfolk, how did you experience being British when you went to Australia?
Oh, it was hilarious. And it soon puts you in check. You know, I hate, always have done, this whole idea of class and putting you in on a, you know, their middle class, their working class, their, you know, lower class. I hated that from the beginning. And the minute you go to Australia, that is absolutely blown out the water, because Australians just found it hilarious. They just think, who are you? You know, we're just all humans. We eat, drink, we do everything. This whole class system. So very quickly, you know, there was this sort of the whinging pom attitude, and it was, you know, they'd say, oh, here comes the whinging pom.
I'd say that to you, the whinging pom.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's the whinging pom. And this is with friends, you know, and I made loads of friends over there, good friends who I'm still friends with today. And it was just this whole, this whole idea that, you know, oh, Britain, they think they're something. And actually, over there it is just an absolute levelling out. It's kind of like we're all the same. We don't really care, and we're not really bothered. We just want to live and enjoy our life, get on, and that was it. And that sort of smacked me in the face straight away. It was like, wow.
It smacked you in the face?
Oh, it did. It really did. It was just like, you know, it made you think. You just think, yeah, actually, yeah, we all just need to get on.
Matt, tell us about the object you've brought in.
Okay, so the object I brought in, it's more to do with, it's actually a person who had quite an impact on my life. I would say later on in my life, probably the last 10 years of my life, which was my grandfather. I first really got to know my granddad, which was an amazing, in his mid 80s, he decided to come and visit us. We were living in Spain then, and he just went and got a passport and got on a plane and flew over on his own. And I could kind of relate to it a little bit. It was like, oh, this is history repeating itself. Here's someone on their own who perhaps, you know, up until that time was quite happy doing his own thing. Very British, my granddad. To suddenly then just say, oh, I'm going to pop over. And he stayed for a month. And he in fact came 2 or 3 times and stayed for quite, you know, parts of the winter. Absolutely loved it. So that kind of, I was like, you know, yeah, it's lovely. And during that time I started to then really form a bond with him. And it was his love of music. He was an amazing pianist, jazz pianist, self-taught. And when he relates his story of how it all started, basically, you know, you hear of people that are just born with a talent. This was my granddad. He just suddenly sat at a piano and could play it. And it was amazing. And so from a very young age, sort of 7 upwards to a small boy, he would go around with my great-grandfather, his dad, to all the East End pubs. Obviously children weren't allowed in pubs, so they would just put a screen round the piano and my grandfather would just play all the old tunes that they would sing along to, a young lad. And my great-grandfather would just go around with his cap, collecting his beer money, basically. And that's what kept him in, pints and drink.
Wow.
And relaying those stories, hearing that, I just loved it. And I could picture it in my mind. And then throughout his life, he just, you know, had incredible experiences, carried on playing the piano. He had to work, obviously. It was he never did it professionally. Couldn't really read music at all, even up until he passed away. He could read music to an extent, but not like follow a score on a piano. Met some amazing people along the way, went to see some amazing, you know, Duke Ellington. He saw several other ones that were just, you know, you read about in history books. Benny Goodman was another one where he said he went with my nan to the Royal, I think it was the Royal Albert Hall, and he actually saw Benny Goodman, the show, and then afterwards Benny Goodman was coming out and he just said, Benny Goodman, you are the best, like this. And Benny Goodman stopped, looked around at my granddad and went, I know. And just to hear stories like that, you know, where we just read about it, you know, Frank Sinatra, all these different characters that he'd either seen or heard. And so whenever I was out with my granddad, if we saw a piano, it was just he just naturally he'd go and play. And wherever we were, if he would just start playing, and people just loved it. And I loved that. I was so proud of him as well, thinking that's my granddad. You know, here he is in Tenerife. We're in a little bar somewhere, and he's just playing the piano for everybody. Just got up and started playing, and it was amazing.
So let's have a look at the
So
picture.
This is actually a picture I've got of him. Here he is.
Okay.
He was sort of a younger man here, playing the piano.
He's all dressed up.
All dressed up to the nines, and would just play. And that was basically his life. He would just entertain in different pubs and clubs, and was a very talented pianist as well. But his knowledge of anything to do, especially with jazz, was phenomenal. I've never ever met anyone like it. And he would listen to a piece of music, and you could see he was playing it in his mind with his hands. And we used to play a little game with him where we'd say, right, okay, I'm just going to randomly, on Spotify or whatever, play a piece of music. Can you tell me anything about it? And he would say, right, that is so-and-so playing at wherever it is in 1940 something, and it was a particular concert. And you'd look at it and go, it is. How do you know? He goes, oh, you can tell. It's just... And it was amazing. And he would do it all the time. So I felt it was a real special honour to be able to do that. And he then instilled in me a love of piano, the jazz. I can't play the piano, sadly, but it just instilled in me that sort of real love of certain pianists. So, when he passed away, and he was a good age, he was, 95 when he passed away, was still quite active, still playing the piano. I inherited pretty much all of his music collection, which is huge.
You're still working your way through that?
Yes, sadly, a lot of it is in the loft. But every now and again, I've just come across little pieces. And even like for his funeral, the music we went into was him playing his own piano.
Did you organise the funeral?
I had a part to play in it. He'd actually got his own funeral plan. But the company that looked after him, I had worked for in the past, so I knew the staff, and they did let me have a little bit of input. I was able to look after him, dress him, and help in that way, and so it was nice to have that part to play. Yeah,
Matt, death is a subject that people think about a lot, and perhaps we should talk about more. Can you describe what your work deals with?
Okay, I agree with you. It's something I think we should all talk about, and I really feel it's very much a British thing that we just don't talk about it. Having lived abroad and seeing how others deal with it, it is sad, but they will talk about it. Here it is totally different. The only time we talk about it is when we have to, which is usually when it's happened. Yeah, my role, whatever you want to call it now, is, I work with a local funeral company in Ipswich. I absolutely love it. It's a passion. I think that passion is because you're able to help people. And really the role of a funeral director, it has changed so much over the years, from very much a sort of a service where you go to, they deal with the situation and the job is done, to now where there is a lot more personal involvement. It's about that person, it's about their life, it's celebrating what they've achieved and just making it personal. So I feel the role has changed, even probably in the last 10 years, it's changed completely. And I feel we're more almost like an events organiser for that person. We still have the necessary.
What is that necessary?
So obviously, it is looking after those that have passed away. And I feel very passionately about how they're cared for and looked after. That has always been my ethos, that I want that person basically to be looked after as if it was my own family. So there is the whole process of wherever they've passed away, even from the minute we arrive, whether it's at a private address, whether it's at a hospital, a hospice, wherever it may be, that I feel very strongly about the dignity of that person and bringing them into our care. And just using those words, you know, not just saying, oh, picking up a dead body, but, you know, bringing a deceased into our care is a much, you know, nicer way of putting it. And just being able to offer something right at the end and help that family. You know, it's the last thing we can do for them now, and it's the last thing we can do for that person. Part of the grief process, you go through various stages, from anger to denial to being very practical. And that very practical is one that we try and pick up on and say, well, look, you know, if you feel it's going to help you, then be involved as much as you can. And any good funeral director will promote that and will say, look, we want you involved as much as you can. I've always said that, you know, what happens behind the scenes, people are perhaps not aware of, but, you know, question it, ask, you know, if you're going to a funeral director's, ask them, I want to see, where's my loved one going to be kept? What are the conditions? Can I see that? And I kind of view it a bit like a good restaurant. You know, you have an amazing meal and you just think that was incredible. I'd love to talk to the chef and see the kitchen. Where is he? And they're kind of like, well, we'd rather you didn't. Or, no, it's not, we don't want you to go there. It kind of raises questions in your mind. Well, why not? And I think it's the same exactly in the funeral industry. You know, if there's questions raised, and it's, you know, it should be open, transparent. And I feel very strongly about that. Hence where I am now, you know, that policy is put in place that families can help with the care of their deceased if they want to help them be washed, if they want them to apply their makeup, if they want to dress them, then that's amazing and lovely. And it just helps them with that whole process. But obviously you've got to have the facilities to do that. So again, you know, I'm proud of where we are and what we've got.
So to not put too fine a point on it, there's a really physical aspect to working in the funeral business in the job that you have.
Yeah.
And there's also a very people-oriented, thoughtful, emotive aspect, but there's a bit of both.
Absolutely, yeah. It is a physical job. You know, there's no denying it. You are moving, transporting. You know, if you're carrying a coffin on your shoulders or if you're driving, whatever it is, there is that side. But there is also the other side of it as well, which is the family. And at the end of the day, that is our absolute priority, is the family.
What have you learned about people through your career?
We are a funny species. We really are. And I think the interesting thing about that particular industry is no two families are the same. No two families deal with grief the same. I think it shows just how vulnerable we are, and shows you how fragile we are. It makes you appreciate life incredibly when circumstances can just change so quickly in the click of a finger. They're in one situation and it's totally turned around, and they're now facing an absolute horrendous situation. So it does make you appreciate the here and now. Each day, you know, every day, I sort of think, you know, I woke up today. Some poor people didn't, and their family are having to deal with that. It makes you appreciate what you've got. It certainly does. It has me. It also makes me value friendship, importance of friendship, importance of family, you know, that close bond, because they're often drawn out when a situation like this happens. You need your family, you need your friends, you need that support very much.
What advice would you give your younger self getting into this profession?
I think it is, as you said earlier, I feel it is pretty much a vocation, like perhaps with nursing or anything else. You know, you certainly don't do it for the money, you certainly don't do it for the career. It's just the fact that you get this huge reward. So for myself, in some ways, I'm very glad that I've done what I've done, and I probably couldn't find anything else that is as satisfying, which some people perhaps think, you know, is odd. Whenever you mention to someone involved in that industry, they're like, oh, how morbid. They always look at the negative. For me, I actually look at the positive, that, you know, you're offering something, you're helping people, and there's nothing more amazing than just at the end of the day or whatever, getting either that phone call, a card, or even a hug from someone who just says thank you. You can't put a price on it.
So going on that, at some point in your early 30s, you quit the funeral business to go and work in another field. How did you end up being a TV presenter?
It was never intended. It was never intended. So basically what happened, we had renovated a cottage in Norfolk with the idea of it being our family home, raising a family and basically putting roots down and settling there. Sadly, that didn't happen. And so it got to a stage where we thought we want to do something with our lives. We want to, here we are, we're doing a sort of 9 till 5, both of us. I was just I had my own cleaning company as well that I'd started up, as well as doing funeral stuff. It was all a bit crazy. And I just thought, you know what, I just feel like we need a complete break and a change. So we looked out the window and I went, let's just go. So Nikki was like, yeah, okay. Amazingly. So we said, well, look, let's put the cottage up for sale. Let's see what happens. It sold within like a day, which kind of were like, wow, what do we do now? So we bought another little flat. We just thought we've got a contingency plan. We've got a base we can use. Kind of settled all our affairs and off we went. 2 big suitcases and flew off to Tenerife. And with no real plan.
That's not a course of events that lots of people go through,
No.
Matt.
I think we just thought we wanted an adventure. We both thought, we really want to do something interesting. We really want to go and, have something that we can look back and go, you know what, we achieved it and did it. So, it's not a normal thing to do. And it was quite, for me, again, a little bit out of character to suddenly go, right, let's do it. But we did.
That still doesn't answer how you ended up being on TV.
No, I'm trying to avoid that. So it was a case of once we arrived there, we found that work was very difficult. One, we didn't speak the language. We were trying to learn Spanish. That was quite difficult. And just getting into a kind of, a routine in life. We gave ourselves 6 months. We said, we'll give ourselves 6 months. If it doesn't work out, we just go back to England. We've got a flat, we'll be okay. And it kind of got to the stage where we literally were thinking, what are we going to do? Our money is running down. We don't want to touch our savings. And it then just transpired. I put an advert out in one of the local libraries and it just started with some local work, gardening. And we were just grabbing anything we could do. Nikki started working for a businessman, doing some cleaning and home care and cooking. Then I started to work in a cafe, so I became a waiter. And it was there that I didn't realise that there was a German estate agent. And he also ran a TV station, just part-time, just ran a little station. And he used to come down for his lunch. I just used to chat to him and give him the usual, spiel and try and get him to eat and drink more. And he just said, oh, you're very much a people person, aren't you? He said, you like to talk and chat and you're very quite natural. He said, said, interesting, and just left it. And then one day he just came along and he just said, I'm going to develop my TV station. How do you feel about coming on board? And looking after the English side of the station. So I was like, oh, yeah, okay, I'll give it a go. Got nothing to lose.
You said, I'll give it a go.
I'll give it a go. So it was very interesting. It was basically, it was a very tiny little station, basically in the north of the island. So we weren't covering masses and thousands of people. It was really a tourist information channel. So it was always got to be positive. We had to make sure that basically the logo was that the sun always shines on Tady TV. This was his logo. So basically, welcome to paradise. You've come here, you're going to have an amazing time. So we were never allowed to deal with anything negative, anything happening. The fact that everyone was having riots because of a local pay dispute within the local government, couldn't mention that. But you could mention that it was a bright sunny day and we've got a lovely festival celebrating whichever saint it was that particular week. So it was fascinating. So we set up a studio, or he set up a studio. I would go in each day. I had to find my own news, edit it, then put it onto the auto cue, then quickly make myself look half presentable, and then present the news at 12 o'clock, which then went out live and then was on basically a loop for the rest of that day. It was also on radio as well that they would do it. We had to find our own material and content. Very difficult. Also, my pronunciation in Spanish was horrendous. It still is. People would probably cringe by the way I was pronouncing places or my Spanish whenever it came into it. He was a fascinating character, German, but everything was very military. It was all like, we do it this way, this way, this way, that's it.
How did that work out for you?
I found that really difficult. Timekeeping, again, this all comes back to the ADHD thing. Being organised, structure. I did find that a little bit difficult, to be honest, but it was also just, I think because it was such a different direction totally, absolutely, you know, I never dreamt of it, to then suddenly going on the streets and interviewing people and holiday makers and interviewing, you know, semi-famous people, going to concerts, all sorts of things, being the weatherman, presenting a cookery programme with a puppet rat. You couldn't make it up. Green screens and having all these random screens put behind you, all done in the shell of a garage, basically. It was incredible. It was very interesting.
What did you learn about making the news?
I suppose it shows you the power of TV, that you could almost get away with anything. But it was also, what I found very interesting was then the way people treated you. So, for example, because it was a very small community, and there's a lot of expats in that area, they would watch it because it was just on telly, and it would be rolling all the 24 hours a day. It was just on a loop with different information. So you then start to get recognised, which was quite hilarious because, you know, they'd come up to you and, oh, hi, Matt, it's lovely. Oh, you know, Matt's been my best friend. I've known him. And, you know, I don't know this person. And it's just hilarious how people suddenly change from, you know, oh, you know, don't know you to, oh, I'm your best friend, and isn't it amazing, and oh, isn't he lovely, and oh, I've always watched the television when he's on, you know, quite gushing. I found that quite amusing, and just how people are with you in that scenario. But I really did enjoy it.
Did it take you out your comfort zone?
It did, because I had to almost be someone I wasn't. There was, you know, there's the Matt on telly and then there's the Matt in private. And that's probably anyone, I think, who's in that business would be the same. The person you perhaps see behind the camera is not the person you generally see in private. It did take me out of my comfort zone. The part I loved was the fact that I could be chatting away to people and just talk. I found that natural. That wasn't an issue. The difference was then when you were perhaps in a scenario perhaps like this, interviewing someone, I found quite difficult because it was like a one-to-one, a bit more, yeah, and having to follow a script as well, and you know, and get the points across that you wanted or you wanted them to say. I found
you're
that
quite challenging to interview.
I know. So that was quite difficult. That whole process, but in whole, yeah, I loved it, and we had so much fun doing it. And it wasn't really a serious, you know, it wasn't a serious thing as such, because it was just a little channel on a little island in the middle of nowhere.
Don't diminish the fact that you left the UK to be a TV presenter.
Well, yeah, I didn't perhaps leave to be a TV. It just happened. It happened. It evolved, and suddenly that was it.
Is there anything you've taken from this TV career that is still a part of you?
I think the biggest thing is not to take yourself seriously. I really, you know, and people do, and that makes me laugh. Don't take yourself seriously.
Why did you learn that from TV? How did that?
Because you're then putting people on the spot, a bit like this, that you're interviewing them or you're talking to them, and you're kind of like, yeah, I'm not getting the real person here. This is not how they are. So yeah, it was quite interesting just to see people's reactions and how they were totally different behind the screen or behind the camera to when they were not.
It's a persona. It's a character.
It is. It's all a show. And at the end of the day, it was for entertainment. And that's what you've got to remember. And I think some of the things, like we say, there was one part where we started a cooking, and I love cooking. So we had this cooking experience where we'd have chefs from different restaurants come in. But I would be like the useless kind of helper, along with this, basically there's a guy behind the counter with his hand up a rat's backside being the puppet. And I'm talking to this rat, oh, how do we do this? And let's make an omelette. And it was kind of, it was just so surreal that in the end I thought, how can I take myself, you can't take yourself seriously. And we would be, most of the time it was a happy situation. We were going where people were celebrating or enjoying themselves or holiday makers. So it was a lovely positive vibe. And I think that kind of rubbed off on me then that, don't take yourself too seriously. The rat thing kind of clinched it, I think. It was like, has it come to this?
So you then moved back to the UK, and from the outside, some people might find that unusual that you went from this joyous public persona of happy-go-lucky to what some people might feel was a sad business. How did you feel about it?
I just said to Nikki one day, do you want to be cheered up? Because she was miserable. We'd been back in the UK probably a month, 2 months. She was hating it. I said, I'll cheer you up. I said, they've got an open day at the crematorium. Let's go down there and see what's going on. And she's just like, oh, really? I said, yeah, come on, it'll be nice. We're going to go down. So we went to the local crematorium and they had an open day. And I was like, this is great. Started talking to people. And before I know it, I got myself a part-time job with one of the local funeral companies there. And he just said, we'd love to have you on board. Come and join us. And that kind of started the whole ball rolling again. Started working with them and it developed. So it wasn't necessarily, I hadn't necessarily thought of coming back to England and starting in the funeral business again, but it just happened. And I think I was just naturally drawn, and it has this pull. I think the funeral industry does, that once you're kind of in it and you love it, you're hooked and it will grab you again. Hence why a lot of people stay within that industry right through till they sort of can't carry or can't walk. And there's lots of characters within the industry who are well past retirement age, but they just love it. So yeah.
Is there space for another on the spur of the moment mad move?
I wouldn't rule it out. No, I wouldn't rule it out. Nikki says, I've always got itchy feet, and even like where we are now, I'll always be looking on Rightmove and all sorts of things and think, oh, that's interesting, and should we do it? And Nick usually gets me back in tow. And it's like, do you really want to be doing this at your stage of life? And, can we not just keep life fairly simple? And I'm like, yeah, of course you're right. I think, again, it is this amazing brain we're given that I just kind of go off on a tangent. I blame very much an ADHD thing, that it's like, oh, this is interesting, and then I go, it's a bit like a moth. Oh, that looks it, and I'm off there, and then it's like, come back to reality. So yeah,
leave it for a while. But
I think so. Yeah, I wouldn't rule it out. We go to different countries. I think, it could be nice. We could live here, and it's a random. But then it's like, come on, Matt, just get back. So yeah, I won't rule it out. Who knows?
Is there a saying or a proverb that's carried you through some of these changes that you could say? Is there something that you've often heard?
I don't know if I've got it the right way round, but basically let people think you're quite an intelligent and sensible character, and don't shatter that illusion by opening your mouth and ruining it. So I'm learning to kind of keep a bit more stum. I do tend to sometimes be a bit outspoken and just come out with things, which is always good. And again, this has come through sort of recent sort of help as well, about perhaps just taking a step back and just breathe, and instead of perhaps just a knee-jerk reaction and doing something, maybe just look at the bigger picture a little bit more. It's easier said than done, but yeah, just sort of think, right, okay, yeah. And I'm trying to cultivate the art of listening more.
Well, I'm glad you haven't listened. I'm glad you've spoken, because otherwise we wouldn't have had such an amazing conversation. Thank you, Matt Southgate, for being with us this afternoon.
Oh, that's no problem. Thank you.